Hello, beautiful people. Just a short update for today. I'm actually taking it would have been the third part of the art series class that my mother and I took. However, we skipped the middle one because we were like, neither of us really knows how to draw birds. So some of the other artists that were in the class were, as I think I mentioned in my other vlog, unbelievably talented. So the other portion of that, which is on drawing, I think, flowers and plants today, is happening. So I'm going to be going to that. I am so incredibly excited to experience that, and I will vlog what that was like afterwards. And so there will probably be a brief little follow-up to this after. So have a beautiful day, and I will see you soon. Hello family, welcome back to another video. So this will be a follow-up to the very, very brief video that you likely saw before this. You are now seeing me post art class. The way that this three-part class was broken up was the first class was butterflies and moths, and then the middle class, which we decided not to take. The second class we didn't take because it was on birds, and we didn't feel like our technical skills were up to bird snuff, so we didn't go to that one. And then today's class, the third class, the final of this little mini series, was on botanicals and flowers. So there are two things I would mainly say about the class. One was that it was not what I expected. What I had expected / thought / slightly hoped for, to be honest, was an art class, which in some ways it was. However, the class itself ended up being more of for example, let's say you go out in nature and there's some beautiful wildflowers that you want to paint, or there's a butterfly or any sort of creature that you want to paint. It's sort of taught us how to recognize, I guess you could say, the dominant features that you would want to capture, because, you know, one of her points was that when you're out in nature, because the gal who was teaching this class, I don't know what the title is, but was essentially a specialist in drawing medical and, I suppose, scientific via the outdoors, bugs, insects, butterflies, that sort of stuff. I don't know what it's called scientifically, if I haven't already said that. She was a specialist in doing that, and she had, I don't know how it works, I guess it's cheaper, she was saying, to hire an artist to document things for you artistically than whatever the alternative would be. At any rate, her specialty was in the scientific documentation of animals, plants, whatever. So what was interesting about that, and that's the second point about the class, was that it was not in fact an art class. It was really more of a scientific observation class of, okay, you're out in the wild and you want to document something which is fleeting. For example, not a part of the landscape, like, again, a butterfly, an animal, or whatever. So essentially, what it turned out the purpose of the class is more to teach you how to document things that are fleeting in your environment. Again, artistically, it seemed like, more than what I misinterpreted and thought that it was more of a technical, like, teach you how to paint watercolors class. So on that aspect, I was a bit sad. However, I'm also interested in science and documentation and things like that. And I do, of course, want to document flowers and plants and animals that I see out in nature. And it's true. Her point was, they don't hold still for you. You know, they're not going to pose and be like, paint me like one of your French girls, Mr. DeVille. You know, a deer walking through is not going to hang out with you for a minute necessarily. So that part I did enjoy about the class. So all things said and done, she brought us lots of art stuff to use, and I decided to go. So my first mistake was that I opted to go with a tool that I have only used once before, and it was in the previous class of hers. They're brush pens. And so what essentially they are is like watercolor pen brushes. So they're pens, but they have a brush tip. And somehow or other, I don't know how, they're loaded with the color. So all you really have to do is paint with them. And then what you would do is take like a wet, regular watercolor paintbrush, and you can, it's kind of like when you, because you've seen me use eyeliner so many times. When you apply eyeliner though, if you were to take eyeliner and then intentionally smudge it, which of course you wouldn't. However, in this case, the way it draws on paper is a bit like eyeliner might. And then you, like I said, you take a wet brush and you can kind of spread the ink. It's a really, really neat tool. At any rate, it was a mistake to use on this particular project. When we came in, what she had us do was to observe these flowers, fresh flowers and grasses that were cut from around the prairie area of her home. So wild out in nature flowers. So my first mistake was using the pens that I was not very familiar with, because the colors are rather intense, and as I found out later, when they blend, sometimes they just straight bleed together. So anyway, one of the ongoing lessons of watercolors is the different moisture levels and how to blend, and something that I'm definitely still learning. And the other thing that came out of this class, which was good, is that I will most certainly want to sign up for an actual art class, like be that drawing or be that painting. And I find that very exciting, because in that I will be taught how do people do these wonderful things symmetrically. Because also the other folks in my class, like when you see my sad little piece of art, I don't want you to think that actually it seemed like every other person in the class, my mother and I aside, were very talented painters, and I wish I could share their art with you. One woman painted a beautiful sunflower, like with like carnation to the side. Another woman painted snapdragons, which I don't know if you're familiar with them. Maybe I'll throw a quick image on screen here. They're beautiful, and she painted some purple snapdragons. The woman sitting to my right painted the bouquet basically as it was, and I'm there just trying to do what ended up being like a goofy flower study, just because my paints ran together. Anyway, my little just flower study drawing. Obviously the colors on this was a grass that I was trying to portray, and this was a flower that I couldn't get the texture right. So this is the result of watercolors bleeding together rather poorly. So certainly not my best work, although I have to say I like the way my leaf turned out a lot. That was cool. So I don't have much to show for it, because as it turned out, the class wasn't so much to teach you how to do the drawing part, which is really what I need the guidance on. It was more of an observational, what shapes can you see, so that if you go to quickly document a really quick sketch when you're out and about, you can take the art with you and that sort of stuff. So I found it cool, and I thought that I would share that with you guys. At any rate, what I want to say to you is, if you haven't done anything new in a while, try something new for fun. The worst thing that happens is it's maybe not what you expected, like case in point, and you turn out with what looks like somewhat of a 5-year-old's version of some echinacea flowers and whatever. By the way, this was just me trying to paint a cherry blossom, because I had gotten kind of frustrated with myself that I couldn't make it look nice. Like, I've painted echinacea flowers before and had them look much nicer than that. Anyway, I was trying to be polite as per usual, and thus turned down the opportunity to use my own watercolor paper, which is good, and instead ended up using the mixed media paper, which, sure, I'm gonna blame the mixed media paper and the amount of water. I also overused the water and things. So you know what's fun is that the journey of watercolors or learning anything new is that journey of learning. It's a learning curve. And so although my picture to me doesn't look that great, it's part of the process. I certainly learned what to and what not to do, or the kinds of things that those pens can be really nice for. For example, we're just going to cover that for a minute. The highlight, I don't know what you'd call it, a vein on that leaf that I made, I actually think looks really nice. And the way that was done, in my opinion, slightly more easily, because normally when you paint with watercolors, you have to kind of wait for a layer to dry, then you can add more. However, that I did with those pens, because I threw in the basic shape and then kind of did a highlight like you would, again, with an eyeliner. And it came out looking really cool as a texture. So anyway, my point is to go and try new things and play with mediums and stuff that you've never messed with before, and see what kind of an experience you can have. It can be fun. It's mind-opening. I think I spoke about it in my other video where I talked about this, that it causes you to hopefully be in a space where you're less judgmental of yourself and you're a little more playful and relaxed. So I hope that you've enjoyed this video. That's what I've been up to. Have a beautiful and a blessed rest of your day or night. If you do need any sort of support or coaching, feel free to reach out to me here at this email address. It would be my pleasure to serve you, my beautiful soul. So until next time, I will see you, beautiful cats, in the next one. Namaste, much love, and stay healthy. Bye. Maybe for a funny story in a future video, I'll talk about what this flower that I was trying to paint is actually called. But essentially, like, they're not gonna pose and be like, paint me like one of your French girls, Mr.